brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. I'm just working on getting my Facebook set up here. Bear with me for a second. I want to make sure that I'm picking up on all your pithy comments. There I am, big as life, twice as ugly. And Sherry Uriarte was the first one on board, saying, half a day, Judge Bob, Jose, and the international radio listening audience. Thank you, Sherry. Okay, so we've been through the respectful reading of the Second Amendment. Now let's go to the daily news. We got stuff to talk about here. So the daily news, as I remind you every day, never runs a local editorial. The editorial is probably best if you have a pair of glasses that corrects your vision from left back to center. Because, you know, when I pick it up to read it, I got it in my hand here, it just pulls my arm hard to the left. So it's very leftist, and it's always very anti-Trump. Oftentimes comes from the USA Today or Gannett News Service. It's never local. And it's always from what we used to call the far side. Today we've got a guy named Alan Draper. Alan Draper is the Ranger Professor of Government at St. Lawrence University in Canton, New York. Now, remind me to never recommend anyone go there.
I think that's a community college.
Probably. When then President Donald Trump's supporters breached the U.S. Capitol to prevent congressional confirmation of Joe Biden, wrong. That's not why they did it. It shifted the frame of the Trump presidency and his voters. And by the way, the title of this editorial is Some Trump Fans Could Warm to Biden. There's hope for them, right? For those who had been warning that it could happen here, January 6th was an I told you so moment. Dramatic events like this assume clarifying power, but we need to be wary of the symbolic influence we attribute to them. For example, the 9/11 terrorist attack was another extraordinary, clarifying event in which American innocence was lost. Many liberals and President George W. Bush were quick to separate Muslims from the heinous act that Muslim terrorists committed that day. They appropriately defended Muslims from the crimes that a few committed in their name. They disputed their othering. Similarly, we should resist the temptation to other Trump voters who are just as bad as, oh boy, whose inclinations are supposedly captured by the storming of the Capitol, just as we did Muslims from fallout of September 11. Some argue that Trumpites don't deserve such generosity, citing polls that Republicans still accept the big lie.
The first three paragraphs?
Yeah, the first three paragraphs of this story. The Pew Research Center found, for instance, that 64% of Republicans and those who lean Republican believe that Trump definitely, probably won the 2020 election. But exit polls review a much more prosaic view of Trump voters than the Capitol marauders. Not that the racist Confederate flag waving rioters, one rioter had a Confederate flag, weren't a part of the Trump coalition, but they were only a part. That so many indicated their household economy improved, twice the percentage of those who admitted their circumstances had declined, is due to the success of the coronavirus relief package that Congress passed and Trump signed. Not Trump. It pumped trillions into the economy such that the disposable income actually went up in 2020. Even though people had more money, the pandemic made them reluctant to spend it. As a result, savings accumulated. It eventually found its way into stocks and housing, pushes their prices higher, increasing household wealth. Biden believes that the pocketbook Trump voter is reachable depending on how well he practices the art of the deal. Continuing policies that have stained those voters, Biden made his first bid for their loyalty with a $1.9 trillion emergency package he sent to Congress. So there's hope for Trump voters because Biden may be able to buy them off. I got a couple of news stories that I want to go into as long as we're talking about Trump here. I've got a story from Epoch Times. Former CIA officer says he left Democratic Party because of impeachment. And he says, Wright said the modern left is infused with systemic hatred, just like the editorial, that has inflamed profound political divisions and predictable outcomes that come with them, especially violence and destruction. The most egregious examples came in the summer of 2020 with leftist race riots that caused upwards of $2 billion in damages, adding that Democrat leaders didn't offer condemnations when the fires raged. Property was vandalized and lives were destroyed. Wright pointed out that democratically elected officials incited violence in 2020. A woman in New York City threw a Molotov cocktail at 4 police officers sitting in their vehicle during a riot and were, quote, unharmed only because gas bomb failed to ignite. Next, a group of rioters in Seattle tried to seal up the doors of a police precinct and ignite the building on fire, burning cops alive. In all, over 700 federal, state, and local enforcement officers sustained injuries and violence perpetrated by leftist rioters. That includes retired St. Louis Police Captain David Dorn, who died defining the city he loved from those encouraged by the Democrat Party's incitement. Wright went on to cite rhetoric from mainstream media pundits such as CNN's Chris Cuomo, who told viewers last year, "Show me where it says protesters are supposed to be polite and peaceful." And NPR's statement that, quote, looting is a powerful tool to bring about real lasting change in society. That's classic NPR. Such statements, he argued, serve to gaslight people into committing acts of violence. At the same time, he suggested that it's hypocritical to impeach troops for allegedly inciting an insurrection when Democrat leaders and left-leaning media outlets emboldened rioters and anarchists last year. House Democrats have argued that Trump's speech incited riot supporters on January 6 to carry out the Capitol breach, which left several people, including an officer, dead. For Democrats like me, we have no choice. We have to leave. But where do we go politically now that our party can no longer be salvaged? The answer is to be found in the exit data from the 2020 election. We're already leaving, it turns out, joining the new populist Republican Party. So I read this because the editorial and what I'm going to read next show you that the rules have really changed, really changed. You know, it used to be that you could go to places where you'd run into your friends who were of the opposite party. And there'd always be a little, there'd always be a little bit of, well, my party's better than yours, and what about the time your party, and a few jokes and things like that. And I think the general recognition was that it was a matter of choice, that either party had its strong points and its weak points. No more. Now, if you are not only a Democrat, Blue Dog Democrat doesn't count. If you are not a left-wing Democrat, you are not only something other than a Democrat, you are a bad person. and you should be treated like a bad person, and you should be dealt with as a bad person. Now, the next thing that I found really makes this clear, and this is from a person named Virginia Heffernan, who writes for, guess what, the LA Times. And this is what she says. Oh, heck no. The Trumpites next door to our pandemic getaway, who seem as devoted to the ex-president as you can get without being Q fans, just plowed our driveway without being asked and did a great job. So these folks live in L.A., and apparently they got a shack up in Big Bear. If you've ever been to Big Bear, it's pretty interesting. You can drive from sunny L.A. to snowy Big Bear in, I think, maybe 3.5, 4 hours. So, you can get a foot of snow up there at Big Bear. So the Virginia's neighbors plowed out her driveway, and they were Trumpites. And then she goes on to say, how am I going to resist demands for unity in the face of this act of aggressive niceness? Of course, on some level, I realize I owe them thanks. And man, it really looks like the guy backdragged the driveway like a pro. But how much thanks? These neighbors are staunch partisans of blue lives. And there aren't a lot of any other than white lives in the neighborhood. This is also kind of weird. Back in the city, people don't sweep other people's walkways for nothing. Maybe it's like what Eddie Murphy discovered in that old Saturday Night Live sketch, White Like Me. He goes undercover in white makeup and finds that when white people are among their own, they pop free champagne and live the high life. As Murphy puts it, slowly I began to realize that when white people are alone, they give things to each other for free. Now, then she goes on to say, Hezbollah, the Shiite Islamist political party in Lebanon, also gives things away free. The favors Hezbollah does for people in the cities, Tyre and Sidon, probably don't involve snowplows, but like other mafias, Hezbollah tends to its own. The Shiites sick, elderly, and hungry. They offer protection and hospitality and win loyalty that way. And they also demand devotion to their brutal us versus them anti-Sunni cause. Some of us are family, the favors they say. The favors say, the rest are infidels. The same is true with Louis Farrakhan, who currently helms the Nation of Islam. While the Southern Poverty Law Center classifies him as a dangerous anti-Semite, much of his flock says he's just a little screwy and unfailingly magnanimous to them. When someone helps you when you're down or snowed in, it's almost impossible to regard them as a blight on the world.
You don't say.
In fact, you're more likely to be overwhelmed with gratitude and convinced of the person's inherent goodness. No. You might end up like the upper middle class family I stayed with in France as a teenager. They did not attend a citywide celebration for the 100th birthday of Charles de Gaulle, the war hero who orchestrated the liberation of his country from Nazi Germany in 1944. They did have several portraits of Philippe Pétain, Nazi collaborator, on their wall. You can see where this is all going, right? When I screwed up the courage to ask how it was for them during the occupation, the lady of the house replied, "We were happy because the Nazis were very Polish." I didn't know the word, so I excused myself to consult a French-English dictionary. Frenchie wasn't there. I was in tears when I found the entry, polite. the Nazis were polite. Isn't that something we heard the other day from another Joe about communists being nice?
With a smiley face.
Yeah. So when I accepted generosity from my pandemic neighbors, acknowledging the legitimate kindness with a wave or a plate of cookies, am I also sealing us in as fellow travelers who are very Polish to each other, but not so much to them? Loving your neighbor is evidently much easier when your neighborhood is full of people just like you. What do we do about the Trumpites around us? Like Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who spoke eloquently this week about her terrifying experience during the insurrection at the Capitol on January 6th, where she lied through her big teeth.
That sentence did not age well.
Americans are expected to forgive and forget before we've even stitched up our wounds. Yeah.
Self-inflicted?
Uh-huh. Or gotten our vaccines against the pandemic that former President Trump utterly failed to mitigate. Yeah. Let's not talk about Operation Warp Speed here in this same sentence. My neighbor supported a man who showed near murderous contempt for the majority of Americans. They kept him in business with their support, but the plowing. On June 6th, after the insurrection, Senator Ben Sasse, a senator from Nebraska, issued an "aw shucks" plea for all Americans to love their neighbors. The United States, he said, isn't Hatfield's and McCoy's, this blood feud forever. And he added, you can't hate someone who shovels your driveway. At the time, I seethed. I can too hate someone who shoveled my driveway.
She said so with a smiley face.
Yeah.
She was nice about it.
Yeah. The Capitol had just been desecrated, but maybe my neighbor heard sass and was determined to make a bid for reconciliation. So here's my response to my plowed driveway for now. Politely but not profusely, I'll acknowledge the Sassian move. With a wave and a thanks, a minimal start on building back trust. I'm not ready to knock on the door with a covered dish yet. I also can't give my neighbors absolution. It's not mine to give. Free driveway work, as nice as it is just not the same currency as justice and truth. To pretend it would be a lie, and they probably aren't looking for absolution anyway. I'm not looking for absolution. Heck no. You should look for absolution here, Ms. Heffernan. But I can offer a standing invitation to make amends, not with a snowplow, but by recognizing the truth about the Trump administration, and more important, by working for justice for all those whom the administration harmed. Only when we work shoulder to shoulder to repair the damage of the last 4 years will we even begin to dig out of the storm. As Rodney, what was his name?
Rodney King?
Yeah, Rodney King said, can't we all just get along?
They gotta stop this lying. It's incredible.
It is. Yeah, it is. And of course, it's the classic pattern, oppressors and oppressed. They've just spent 4 years under the heel of the oppressor. So they're the victims, and now they're entitled to reparations and revenge.
She first cites, who was that comedian? Eddie Murphy.
Yeah.
In this bit he did on Saturday Night Live, which was satire.
Exactly.
Apparently she can't differentiate between reality and fiction. So
Well,
she's merged the two together.
I'm going to write to the New York Times and ask them to install a device that'll go beep, beep when it's necessary. Okay, I noticed that Ms. Heffernan generated a little traffic here on the phone, and I've got a couple of pretty good callers here, a couple of regulars. I've got, well, I hope that Ms. Heffernan is listening, because she would find out that she's going to have to deal with the most dangerous man in the room. The most dangerous man in the room. Put her in her place, Carl.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment something kind of tangential to that. Because I was wondering for a long time, why is it violence, and I mean massive violence, on the left is okay, and the media and academia, etc., on the left pretty much completely ignores it, and yet when the right does something, even a fraction of what the left does, it's a massive response. And I've been listening to some videos by a professor, James Lindsay. James Lindsay was gained fame as part of a trio. As I said, he's got his PhD in mathematics. Two other academics, Helen Pluckrose and Peter Boghossian, they're also academics. They've got their PhDs. I think Peter Boghossian got his in philosophy, and I forget what Helen Pluckrose did. But what they did is they submitted some papers to leftist journals, you know, the studies type of journals, feminist journals, because they noticed a pattern that a lot of these papers they were reading in these journals were really outrageous. I mean, they just had outrageous ideas, and they were said with complete seriousness and long words, but they submitted a total of, I think, 20, and 7 of them were actually accepted. The paper that was one of them that was accepted had to do with dog rape or something like that, you know, as a sign of male patriarchy or something. I mean, it was just totally off the wall. So he's become quite an authority on this idea of cultural Marxism, and he's been in a lot of interviews. And I found it very interesting, one thing he brought up about our old friend Herbert Marcuse. He had an essay that he put out, I don't know, I think it might have been in the 60s, titled, and you might have brought this up at some point, titled Repressive Tolerance.
Yeah, I have. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the whole idea of this, the thesis of it, according to James Lindsay, is in one sentence, and this is from Repressive Tolerance. Quote, liberating tolerance then would mean intolerance of movements from the right and tolerance of movements from the left. And this seed idea has gone out into academia, and then it's been pumped into the minds of young people and, you know, students in general that fall under the influence of these social science professors and humanities professors that are really into this neo-Marxist leftist thinking. And it's gone out into the culture. And I'm sure that's why we're seeing what we're seeing today. Because I found it puzzling. Why is there absolutely no reaction when the left does something? I mean, these violent riots that happened over 7 months, a period of 7 months, injured over 700 police officers. There were over 150 federal buildings damaged. They tried to firebomb them. You know, and I understand it's serious what happened at the Capitol. I'm not saying it isn't, but you know, just comparing the two, I mean, if you put them in perspective, you know, I just found it very puzzling. But I really agree with James Lindsay's thought about this, that this seed idea in this essay, Repressive Tolerance, has gone out and been magnified in academia and in the student population and now into society. And here we are.
You know, Carl, when it came to the riots last summer, not only did the Democrats not speak out about it, they encouraged it. Kamala Harris developed a GoFundMe to fund the bail for people who were arrested and tossed in the pokey in Minneapolis. And she also said, they're not going to stop. They're not going to stop. I'm telling you, they're not going to stop. And they shouldn't stop.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's, we can thank our old friend and nemesis, the late Herbert Marcuse, for planting these ideas in academia and spreading them out across America. And we're reaping the crop right now. And James Lindsay also had a recent tweet thread in which he said, I'm often asked why or how we can win this fight. And he said, win is long gone. He said, we need to be concerned about how we can throw sand in the gears and slow this thing down as much as we can until it burns itself out of its own, ridiculousness. And who knows how long that's going to be and how far this is going to advance. But he said winning is kind of off the table at this point.
And of course, Herbert, as you know, was one of the members of the Frankfurt School in the 1920s, left Germany when Hitler came to power in 1933, relocated to Columbia. So he was one of the stars of the Frankfurt School, and he really found his calling during all of the problems, all of the unrest during the 60s, when young radicals would chant Marx, Mao, and Marcuse. Three of a kind.
Yeah, and that's one thing I've really been interested in trying to find out. How did we get to this point? And little by little, it's like a 10,000-piece puzzle, and a little piece falls in here and another piece there. It's a slow, laborious process. I'm maybe 1% of the way to understanding how, because this is tremendously complicated. These people are not stupid. They're very high IQ people. But anyway, thanks for allowing me to toss in my 2 bits. I appreciate it.
Okay, good talking to you, Carl. So, short break, and we'll come back to another Joe.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at GuamTraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts, brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
Okay, Google. Hey, Siri. Hi, Bixby.
Go ahead, I'm listening.
Open the Point app.
Opening.
Live stream, on demand, swap stations, check out the visual radio. Get the free app available on the App Store and Google Play, or go to thepoint.gu.
Half a day. This is Rocky Martinez, professional heavyweight MMA fighter. Nothing gets in my way when I go pro at Subway. Pack a punch with double the protein on any foot-long sub for just $2 more. For a limited time only. Subway. Eat fresh.
We now return to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, soaring over the confusion with his superpowers of truth. Call 888-TALK. That's 888-8255.
Well, in response to Carl's caller, I'm going to tell a little story I've told before, but it goes like this. After World War I, a group of rich intellectuals in Germany got together at a university in Frankfurt and decided and brainstormed as to how they could move the communist movement forward. Because Marx's theory was that ultimately the working class would overthrow the bourgeoisie. It was inevitable that the workers would unite. Workers around the world would unite. Well, after World War I, it became pretty clear that German workers had no trouble killing French workers in the trenches of World War II, and that theory just wasn't going to go. So they decided they needed a new theory. And they came up with a theory of hollowing out the culture. By changing the culture, they could move the communist ideology forward. That was the Frankfurt School, Marcuse and 6 or 7 others, all of whom were Jewish, all of whom left Germany when Hitler came to power in 1933. They were lured to Columbia University, which was attempting to start a statistical research department. They brought these guys over, talking about letting the fox into the hen house. And they thrived in the United States. They went back to Germany after World War II, most of them except for Marcuse. And during the interwar period, a guy named Antonio Gramsci came along, an Italian communist, and his idea was the hollowing out of the culture and what he called the long march through the institutions. Take over the schools, the colleges, parts of the government, etc., and make things, basically destroy the standing order, the European culture that had made everything work up until that point, and bring the countries and the economies of the West to their knees. Because nobody's going to change when things are going well. But by the infiltrating those institutions, people could be convinced, well, let's give communism a try because capitalism sure isn't working. We've been told that so often, and now we know. And Gramsci also capitalized on the whole cultural Marxist deal, separating people into different identity groups and intersectionality. And that was the foundation. And this just kind of stumbled along until the 1960s came along, when a lot of young folk, gullible young folks, didn't want to go to Vietnam, didn't want to make that any kind of sacrifice like that. So it was very easy for them to grab on to the protests that were inspired by the Frankfurt School. Hell no, we won't go. And took over the institutions. They actually took over the campuses of several major universities, oftentimes with the concurrence of the administrations of the universities. They rolled over and let them come in. So we started the miseducation of a whole generation of young people that were going to school at that time. Well, those people, those children of the 60s have now grabbed a hold of the levers of power, of big corporations, of universities, of nonprofits, of the government. We had a president who campaigned by saying, I will fundamentally change the nature of the United States of America. And it's like, oh, yeah, good deal. Yeah. So that's how it happened. It's an oversimplified version, but that's exactly how it happened. It started in Germany around 1921, 1922, and it succeeded beyond the wildest dreams of those Frankfurters. But that's how it happened. Okay, let me go to another Joe. We can squeeze another Joe in before the next break, before the big halftime show. So another Joe, what can you tell me about the Frankfurt School?
Not much, Kabab, except that it's, I think it's more towards the southern central part of Germany. Frankfurt?
Frankfurt is more the northwest part of Germany, another Joe.
Oh, my bad.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of West Germany. My bad. Now that they're united, it's probably, yeah, you're right, more towards the, was it northwest?
Yeah.
But when it was only West Germany, it was not quite. But anyway, so I was listening to the account of the intelligence guy that basically stopped. He became disillusioned because of the Democrat because of the impeachment and all the hatred. So basically, it's become a culture of death and hatred on the Democrats. It's the only thing that's holding the party. It's got a huge umbrella with so many groups underneath. And at some point in time, you kind of wonder how long they can get along with each other, because there's just so many of them. And the only thing that can latch onto is hate of the opposition, which in this case would be Republicans. And my impression of the transformation as we're seeing it is we're all being forced to accept or go along with or turn our head the other way with this institutionalized abortion, subsidizing killing of our children. And if we don't go along with it, somehow we're bad. And you might as well substitute the word government with Baal, because the Democrats worship the government under their control, and the sacrifice of the abortions are to Baal, and that's just disgusting. So anyway, I don't know how good of an analogy that is, but that's the way it feels. With regards to trying to think here, you're talking about the most dangerous man. Was talking about no. I was thinking about the other day when we were talking about Trotsky. Now that's an example of eventually these communists are going to turn on each other, and they're going to kill their fellow Marxists, because on paper, Marxism and communism might look interesting and appealing, right? It's got it's really well packaged. It's got nice packaging in the outside, but the real test, of anything new, some product is the use of it. And I think you'll find that anything to dealing with socialism, communism, it requires a strongman, and that strongman has to rule with an iron fist in order to get things done his way, and a lot of people are going to become collateral damage along the way.
Let me just butt in a second and emphasize your point here by talking about Leon Trotsky, who was one of the prime movers in the the October Revolution, where the communists were successful in taking over the country from the provisional government. A very good military general, a very good communist, but he was a pure communist. His idea was that communism had to be a worldwide revolution, and that the revolution should never stop. Stalin, who worked his way up from a minor bureaucracy to being the #1 man in Russia, took a different approach. He said that communism should, in the beginning, confine itself to Russia, the Soviet Union, to bring it up to par with the other Western powers so that it could be a match for the other Western powers when the shooting started. And the rivalry between the two was somewhat bitter. And like you said, Stalin was a strong man. His real name was Jugashvili. But he changed his name to Stalin, which means steel in Russian. It's no good having name too hard to pronounce. It's cheap capitalistic label. It's better to call him Stalin. So when this happened, Trotsky knew that he had a problem, so he escaped to Mexico. And Stalin sent an assassin to Mexico to kill him. So this is the thing people don't understand about Marxism. When we used to talk about the Communist Party, some folks would say, well, Communist Party, Democrats, Republican, what's one party or another? The communist ideology is that communism can never survive if it plays by the rules. If you aren't a good liar, you can't be a good communist. If you think that you can't cheat to advance the revolution, you have no business in the Communist Party. So in order to be a good communist, you must be ruthless. That's how it's different from Democrats or Republicans, although we're seeing the Democrats really drifting in that direction, aren't we, another Joe?
Yep. And that's what we have to show our younger generation, Uncle Bob. The real key issue is the younger generation do not have a point of reference, and they are the majority. The millennials are the largest demographic within the United States. They are the ones that have to be convinced, because where the millennials go, so goes America. So that's what we have to do. This is a learning experience. We have to teach our younger generation that this is what the Democrat ploy strategy. This is what their MO is, and you have to win the hearts and minds of these millennials and ask them, do you agree with this, and do you want this future? Because you are seeing it firsthand. And so, if they're true, if they're honest with themselves, they'll answer their own question, and they'll see that primarily these Democrats, they're trying to be more socialists. The danger of becoming more communists. And that's basically being atheists. And in the absence of God, Uncle Bob, where that takes us basically is to ruin and destruction. So anyway, that's pretty much what I wanted to bring up. And thank you for. I don't know if we're on the right at the break or what, but unless you want to say anything else or.
Good comments, another Joe. Thanks for calling in.
Okay. Hey, he's doing my job.
Yeah. Yeah, another Joe said we should take a break, Jose.
You've heard of double mile credit card rewards? You can forget all about that. At First Hawaiian Bank, we're stepping it up. Not one, not two, not three, not even 4 times. You guessed it. First Hawaiian Bank is giving you 5 times the miles. Use your First Hawaiian Bank credit card and get rewarded 5 miles for every dollar spent with qualifying purchases at grocery stores. Plus 20,000 bonus miles. Learn more at any First Hawaiian Bank branch or go to FHB.com to apply today. First Hawaiian Bank. Equal housing lender, member FDIC.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at GuamTraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts, brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
Okay, so there we are. We got about 10 more minutes before that big halftime show that you've all been anxiously awaiting. Turning to the Post editorial, learning centers are a great start. More is needed to ensure students get an adequate education. Even before the pandemic, there were questions on how well Guam students were learning what they needed to be prepared for the world after high school. In previous years, there had been reports of employers, along with the university and GCC, noting that a number of high school graduates lacked foundational reading, writing, and math skills. For employers, it meant applicants were barely able to properly fill out applications or successfully complete written tests. During a recent meeting of law enforcement agencies, officials noted that of the more than 1,000 people who applied for a job, about half were unable to complete the written exam. For higher level education organizations, it meant students had to pay for remedial English and math classes, courses that don't provide credit hours toward a degree, but are necessary to ensure students are prepared for more rigorous college curriculum, which at minimum requires that students have reading, writing, and math skills at the high school level. What a novel concept. And what was happening when children were going to school for at least, that was when what was happening when students were going to school for 180 days a year. Guam law requires public school students to attend classes for 900 hours in a school year. That's roughly 5 hours a day or 25 hours a week. Since March 2020, public school students interact with teachers for a couple hours a day. In-person classes, which the Guam Department of Education restarted last month, are held just 1 day a week for high school students. Online learning continues for the other 3 days. GDOE officials have acknowledged that this isn't ideal. Whoa. And parents understand that. After all, not all parents are ready to send their children to school with Wuhan virus still lurking about. Some teachers have reported having just one student in their in-person classes, which speaks to the level of concern in the community. DOE has opened community learning centers at schools. It's a step towards giving students the tools they need to learn in the midst of the pandemic. In addition, there are people at the centers who can help students. While they still don't provide our students with a full day of academic learning, they do provide computers with internet connectivity so students may not have access at home or have to share a computer and internet with siblings who also go to school, as well as parents who are working from home can finally have a space to do their homework and research. But for many parents, there remains a concern that these efforts are still leaving their children without an adequate education and ill-prepared for the next level, whether it's a new academic year, college, the military, or joining the workforce. Some parents have enrolled children in learning programs that augment what kids are learning in regular school. But is it enough? The math tells us no. There's no reason the law calls for a minimum of 900 instructional hours, which is the amount of time students are supposed to be in class with a certified teacher. Hopefully kids will learn a little bit about English grammar and not use hopefully as an adjective. Hopefully our government and our school system can come up with something more to help our students so we're not faced with a crop of graduates who aren't ready to tackle the challenges that come after high school. And get parents involved, which we know is not easy. There are many parents who want to help their children but aren't always sure how. Additionally, there are many great community organizations that have provided tutoring, etc. We know it's not an easy task, but raising children never is. And our island community should not be okay with saying our kids aren't going to get an adequate education for another school year because of a pandemic. Well, here's my idea. When we are able to open up schools, and no matter how you do it, if the kid is not in school, if the school doesn't meet the 14 points of the Every Child Act, he's not getting an education. Online learning just isn't the same thing. So here's my 2 cents worth. When we finally open the schools, longer days and longer school years. Figure out how much time the kids missed and make up that time. Kids go to school longer, they're going to learn more. Kids will hate it until they're maybe 35 years old, and then they'll say, boy, I'm sure glad they did that. Now that I'm the president of Atkins Kroll, I'd have never made it had it not been for that.
Now, just real quick, they said something here about kids going to school for 1 day out of the week and then 3 days is online learning. Just to clarify, I don't know if that's the truth. I know for firsthand that kids are going to school 1 day out of the week and that's it. They're on their own after that. And then the online teaching is separate from the kids going to school.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's a definite disparity between what they're actually doing and what's being said they're doing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really unfortunate. Okay, I've got Greg on the line who wants to talk about sales tax. So it's not on the card, but bearing with the usual custom, we're in between semi-economy and the beginning of the card. So, Greg, we'll talk to you for a little while about sales tax. What can you tell me about sales tax?
Hey, Bob, how are you?
I couldn't be better.
I love your show.
Thank you.
Hey, here's my concern with sales tax. Now, when you order something on Amazon, you're paying sales tax. Right now, you do not. We don't have sales tax in Guam yet.
That's right.
And anything you order, now you're going to be in 2%.
Hey, Greg.
Sales tax.
Greg?
Yes, sir.
Are you standing behind a B-52?
I was earlier, but I'm not now.
Yeah, I got a lot of background noise.
No, I'm driving. I got you on Bluetooth.
Oh, okay. Well, go ahead.
I don't understand why you got a lot of background noise. My windows are closed. I don't understand.
Maybe it's heavy breathing. Is anybody in the car with you?
No, she's not here.
Okay, you may proceed, Greg.
No, but that's all I'm saying. We got to remember that now we got to pay sales tax on everything that we bring in online.
We do?
Well, if you have a sales tax.
Well, it would depend on how the sales tax were structured. It doesn't necessarily follow. It would depend.
Okay, I'm going to listen.
Yeah, it would depend on how the statute were written as to where the sales tax would apply. It could.
Okay.
Okay.
It was just a thought.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you called, Greg, and maybe you might, while you're out driving around, take your car in for a tune-up.
It's new.
Wow, you got some pretty loud pipes then, Greg. Thanks for calling.
Take care.
Yeah, that's a lot of background noise there. Okay, let's break for that big halftime show that we've been looking forward to.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Incitement of insurrection. I'm Mary Corsetti, Fox News. House Democrat impeachment managers presenting their arguments to the Senate Wednesday, alleging President Trump incited the January 6th Capitol riot. Prosecutors unveiled video footage and audio of the unrest at the Capitol that day. California Republican Congressman Devin Nunes, however, is questioning the motives behind Democrats' accusations.
They don't want Donald Trump to win. They fear that 74.5 million people voted for Donald Trump. That's what's really going on here. The rest of America actually is wondering, why can't we get the vaccines, for example, in the state of California? Why is Joe Biden promising something that Donald Trump was already doing, and with 1 million vaccines a day?
Representative Nunes speaking on Fox's Hannity. Wednesday was the second day of the impeachment trial. Impeachment managers will continue presenting their case Thursday, with former President Trump's defense team set to follow. Plus, President Biden is asking the highest court in the land to uphold Obamacare after the previous administration's attempts to end it.
The Biden administration's request came in a letter to the Supreme Court. It praised Obamacare for ensuring millions of Americans, but the government under former President Trump sought to kill the Affordable Care Act mainly on the individual mandate it contained. It required people to get insurance or pay a financial penalty. The Trump White House called that mandate and the entire ACA by association unconstitutional. The Biden administration letter says the government is no longer of that opinion and that no more legal briefs are needed before a high court ruling expected by June. Gernal Scott, Fox News.
Also new tonight, frigid temperatures, dangerous wind chills, and snow continue to blanket the central third of the U.S., while beginning to expand into the northwest. 2 large winter storms are taking shape, with an ice storm from Arkansas to Kentucky and snow for the mid-Atlantic through early Friday, while a heavy snowstorm moves into the west. America is listening to Fox News.
Half a day. This is Alicia Blas from Security Title. reminding you that your 2020 property taxes are now due and payable. You may not know that you can pay your taxes online at pay.guam.gov. All you have to do is follow these simple steps. Register, log in, get a PIN, and pay. If you purchased a property after March 2nd, 2020, you will likely not receive a tax bill in your name, but you will still owe the tax. Call the professionals at Security Title. We are here to help.
The vaccine is officially here, and we aren't just talking about the COVID vaccine, but a financial vaccine at Bank Pacific. We may not be doctors, but we can help you with your financial health. Whether to take advantage of today's crazy low rates, or just a local bank that has your back. At Bank Pacific, we want to help make 2021 your best year yet. Because for 66 years, where others put branches, we place roots, and we're rooting for you. Equal housing lender, member FDIC.
Alexa.
A legal dispute between an NBA executive and a California police officer appears to be over.
Alan Strickland has dropped his lawsuit against Toronto Raptors president Masai Ujiri, filing for dismissal in a California district court Wednesday. This stems from an incident following Game 6 of the 2019 NBA Finals as Ujiri attempted to join the Toronto Raptors on the court at Oracle Arena to celebrate their title win over the Golden State Warriors. Strickland claimed Ujiri had pushed him in the face and chest, causing him physical injuries that had kept him out of work. Ujiri denied the allegations, with video later showing that Strickland had first shoved him over, allegedly not having proper credentials to get on the floor. The Raptors president countersued Strickland. That complaint has also been dropped. Matt Napolitano, Fox News.
And Bruce Springsteen is facing a drunk driving charge in New Jersey, prompting Jeep to pause the Super Bowl television commercial that features him. A spokesperson for the National Park Service says Springsteen was arrested November 14th in the Gateway National Recreation Area. He received citations for driving while under the influence, reckless driving, and consuming alcohol in a closed area. The spokesperson says Springsteen was cooperative throughout the process. Jeep released a statement saying in part, quote, "It's right that we pause our big game commercial until the actual facts can be established," end quote. Plus, South by Southwest reveals its film lineup.
Music documentaries take center stage at this year's South by Southwest Film Festival, with Charlie XCX's career doc, Alone Together, as the closing night film. And Tom Petty, Somewhere You Feel Free, which focuses on Petty at work on his 1994 album Wildflowers. They joined Demi Lovato's Dancing with the Devil, a YouTube original, which is the opening night film. The festival is now in its 28th year. It announced its entire slate will be online and will be a slimmed-down version due to the pandemic. It'll run between March 16th through the 20th.
Fox's Michelle Polino. I'm Mary Corsetti, and this is Fox News.
Listen to The Point. Any speaker, anytime. Check us out on your FM radio at 93.3, 104.3 HD3, thepoint.gu, Facebook Live, YouTube Live, and tune in. And announcing radio.com. Download the app and hear The Point. Get the latest news, sports, entertainment, and more. On demand. Your phone is digital. Your life is digital. And we are too. 93.3, The Point.
When's the last time you looked at your homeowner's insurance?
A homeowner's policy protects much more than just your house. It also protects you against claims from someone being hurt on your property. If a visitor is injured at your place, how much are you covered for? The smart thing to do is get the answer today.
That's the Insurance Extra Point. Get out there and make something good happen today by calling Guahan Insurance Services at 475-1162 or visit us at the Camacho Landmark Center in Tamuning.
Looking for a place to celebrate this Valentine's Day? Treat your special someone to Mezcla Bistro in Hagåtña. Enjoy their Sweethearts menu that comes with complimentary sparkling wine, house wine, or draft beer, and a choice of 3 tantalizing set menus created by Master Chef Peter Dueñas, and an irresistible warm melting chocolate lava cake with creamy vanilla ice cream. Let Mezcla serve you up a memorable evening with the true taste of Guam. Call Mezcla at 479-2652 or 3. Limited seating available.
So here we are, big halftime show on Tall Tales, ended with that barrage of cannon fire. Means we're in the second half of Tall Tales. I'm going to start out the second half here with a little weather curiosity once again. On Tuesday, 2 days ago, the temperature was high of 77, high of 87, a low of 77. But in 1969, the low temperature was 68 degrees. And the reason I bring this up is you'll recall that last week, the Daily News had this big scoop that the temperature had dropped to 69 degrees, and it was a record. It was a record for that day, but not an all-time record. So I just show you, and last week it dropped down to 68 again, and then on February 9, 1969, the temperature was 68 degrees. And then I mentioned that on February 8, the record temperature was in 1973. It was 65 degrees. So it does get a little bit cool here on our beautiful island. When I'm visiting in the mainland and people ask me what the weather's like, I tell them, if you live here for 5 years, you might see the temperature drop below 70. Maybe not. That's true. You could be here for 5 years and never see the temperature drop below 69. Okay, let's go to the card. I've got the program summary here. And let's see. Maybe I don't have the program summary here. Well, I've got Judy Guthertz versus the judicial process. That's the first item on the card. An interesting story as to how Judy apparently thinks the judicial process works. And then I've got the Post versus John Kanata dealing with the Freedom of Information Act. And then Rory and Nelson are still battling. And then the new comedy team, Sabina and Tello versus Ghostbusters, Bavacqua versus the military, Democrats versus Trump, etc. So let's just jump right into the card with Judy Guthertz versus the judicial process. And this is a story that ran in the Post this morning. And this is what Judy says, Commissioner Judy Guthertz of the CCU, among other things. I have just read the news story that the defendant in the machete attack wants conviction overturned. Manny Russellep was found guilty of aggravated assault, 2 counts of terrorizing, and criminal mischief and family violence. According to his attorney, Manny Russellep was found guilty and was sentenced to serve 24 years in prison. He was convicted of terrorizing for communicating a threat to commit a crime of violence dangerous to human life. In a Guam Supreme Court appeals hearing held last week, the attorney representing Manny Russellep in his appeal reportedly told the court, quote, the facts are basically that he walked down the street and was striking several vehicles on the rear passenger side with a machete. Now, I'm getting a little ahead of the story here. He was convicted of terrorizing for communicating a threat to commit a crime. So just make a little mental note of that. According to the attorney, the word communicate has to mean that his client intended the person who received it to express a threat to the person. So if he says, I'm going to hit you, that's a communication. If he hits a car, that's not necessarily communicating to the person in the car that he intends to hit him, and it's certainly not communicating a threat of violence dangerous to human life, because he didn't even try to hit someone. Well, So far, I understand. Communicating a threat means communicating a threat. And we go on. If he hits a car, that's necessarily communicating to the person in the car that he intends to hit him, and it's certainly not communicating a threat of violence dangerous to human life, because he didn't even try to hit someone. He just hit the car, and not even on the vehicle side of the vehicle where the person was. Now, let's remember where we are here. We're in the Supreme Court of Guam. Cases get to the Supreme Court because an appeal was filed from a decision of the Superior Court. If it's a criminal case, it was a criminal case, so the defendant has filed an appeal from the guilty verdict in the Superior Court. On appeal, it's the lawyer's job to look at the law, the factual record, and make the best argument that he can in favor of an acquittal or a reversal for his client. That's his job. That's why he's paid the big bucks. It's not the it's not the defense attorney's job to say, come before the court and say, you know, Your Honor, this guy was a bad dude, and I'm supposed to defend him here, but the only thing I can tell you is that he's kind of friendly, taking the another Joe defense to the Supreme Court. Okay, so that sets the stage. Okay, enter Judy Guthertz. I am very familiar with what happened during this machete attack outside the main road entrance to the University of Guam. I was the victim of this attack, among other drivers of vehicles who were departing the UOG campus in June of 2019. Manuel Resolep brutally attacked my vehicle with me inside. Manuel pounded on my vehicle window, and he would have physically hurt me if he could have. He was loudly yelling at me through the window with gutter, vulgar words with a machete in his hand, and he aggressively pounded on the passenger side and rear portion of my vehicle, causing thousands of dollars in damage. This car was a small Fiat with a soft top, and it was clear to me that he would have torn through the soft top with his machete if he had more time. Resolep clearly communicated to me his intent to hurt me. The attorney representing Manny Resolep was not at the scene of the crime. So what's he got to talk about? Counsel wasn't at the scene of the crime or the subject of the machete attack. He was probably home watching a football game on TV. What's he got to say about this? The attorney representing Manny Resolep was not at the scene of the crime or the subject of the machete attack. I was, Guthert says. The attorney was not the victim of his crimes. Wow. What a revelation. You mean this guy that was defending the defendant before the Supreme Court on appeal was not the victim of the criminal? What is this world coming to? We ought to pass maybe I ought to get out my nasty letter software here and draft a statute that says no one can represent a criminal and a criminal defendant in an appeal before the Supreme Court unless he had been the victim. Let me correct that. Unless they had been the victim. That makes a whole lot more sense, doesn't it? The attorney is creatively trying to convince the justices to redefine what communicating intent means. As I explained earlier, it sounds like the lawyer's doing his job. I'm hopeful that the good justices of the Supreme Court know better. It was a terribly dangerous attack. I was threatened and attacked. I feared for my life, and I shall never forget that day. Well, sorry. I just wonder what we're supposed to gather from this writing. Apparently, Judy thinks what we ought to do is when the Supreme Court is in session, people could sit in the peanut gallery there out in the seating for observers, and when something like this comes up, raise your hand, Your Honor. Your Honors, he wasn't there. I was there, and that's just not what happened.
Pick me, pick me. Did you see the title of today's show?
What was it?
Commissioner Guthridge proves that it's okay to communicate about personal matters as long as you're not a CCU employee.
Yeah. Okay, so I kind of cheated here. I got out some law here, and he was convicted apparently of aggravated assault, and this is what aggravated assault is: 9 GCA 1920. A person is guilty of aggravated assault if he either recklessly causes or attempts to cause serious bodily injury to another in circumstances manifesting extreme indifference to the value of human life, causes or attempts to cause serious bodily injury to another, etc. And it is a felony of the second degree. So it sounds like from the Guthridge's recital here that's what happened. And then there's something else, just going through the statutes here. Reckless conduct. A person is guilty of reckless conduct if he recklessly engages in conduct which unjustifiably places or may place another in danger of death or serious injury. And along the same lines, terroristic conduct. A person is guilty of terroristic conduct if he threatens to commit any crime of violence with intent to cause evacuation of a building, place of assembly, etc. It's not that, right? And then we have criminal mischief, which he was convicted of. A person commits criminal mischief if A, B, C, D, he intentionally damages the motor vehicle of another, and that's a third-degree felony. And then terrorizing. Now, this is what the statute says. Terrorizing. A person is guilty of terrorizing if he communicates to any person a threat to commit or to cause to be committed a crime of violence dangerous to human life against the person to whom the communication is made or another, and the natural and probable consequence of such a threat is to place the person to whom the threat is communicated or the person threatened in reasonable fear that the crime will be committed. So in other words, all of the things that happened at UOG didn't have to happen in order for there to be a conviction of 1960 terrorizing. There had to be the communication of the threat. So, what the top of Judy's car was made of and some of these other things are really kind of irrelevant, because the key word in 19.60 is communicated. And without having sat through a trial, without knowing what the record was in the trial, what the testimony was, if the prosecution wasn't able to show that the defendant communicated a threat to commit or cause to be committed a crime, it's not that he committed the crime, that he communicated the threat to commit the crime. So it's sort of like this. I've got a can of gasoline in my car, and if you don't do what I tell you to do, I'm going to throw that gasoline on you and light a match. That would be terrorizing without ever picking up the gas can. That would be terrorizing. Picking up the can of gasoline and throwing it on the guy and lighting the match, it's a crime for sure, but it's not terrorizing. So, Judy, I don't know how often you listen to the show, but I go through this more than once. Lawyers have a toolkit, and the first tool that a lawyer pulls out of his toolkit is a knife so sharp that you can split hairs with it. It's the lawyer's job to split hairs, and the lawyer's job to make sure that the prosecution, that the government does its job. And if the prosecution doesn't lay out all the elements of the crime and prove them up, it's the defense counsel's job to bring that up before the Supreme Court on appeal. It just doesn't work on this basis. Well, I was there and I know. So, you know, any ruling other than what I personally think could happen because of my own experience, well, what did she say? She said the attorney is creatively trying to convince the justices to redefine what communicating intent means. And I don't find the words communicating intent in the statute. The statute uses the words communicate, communicated, etc. The word intent does not appear in 1960 at all. So that's not part of it. So Judy knows what his intent was, but that's not what the statute requires. So she said the attorney is creatively trying to convince the justices to redefine what communicating intent means. I'm hopeful that good justices of the Supreme Court know better. Well, the justices of the Supreme Court know what the law says, and they know how the system works. And, everybody has the ability to write a letter to the editor, pretty much say whatever you want to. But it may very well be that people will read your letter, Judy, and think, yeah, that's the way it should be. She knows. She was there. And that defense counsel wasn't even there. What does he know about it? Okay, so let's move on to the next item on the card. But I notice I've got somebody in the green room already. Yeah, probably another Joe, huh? It is, huh? Good, because I lost my oops. No, I didn't. Another Joe wants to comment on the Wrestle-Up case, okay? Hello, another Joe. Long time no talk. I haven't talked to you for at least, 20 minutes?
There you go.
Uh-huh.
Is that the case where it was this attack by the young man with a machete?
Yeah. Two young men with two machetes, yeah.
So I was just curious, your professional opinion, should the sentence have been less than 24 years? I get the impression that with parole, with good behavior, you get parole after 5 years.
No.
Or, I don't know, less than years.
No. 85% generally. 85% of your sentence. But even if you serve your entire sentence, there's 3 years of parole after you're let out of jail, out of prison.
So the least amount of time you would have to serve would be like somewhere around 20 years.
At least, yeah.
Well, I mean, it's been heard of that these prisons, they decide that it's overcrowded and they can't afford it, and they start releasing prisoners for all kinds of reasons. But I was just curious if it's appropriate to speculate. Would it be possible to explain the demonstration of usage of the actual machete as a communication that there will be continued use of such machete on these vehicles by demonstrating on several vehicles? Was it they were attacking several vehicles?
They according to the news article, Wrestle-Up was walking down a line of vehicles and hitting them on their right rear fender with a machete.
I suggest this young man has some sort of mental impairment as a defense. Maybe they should be studying whether he has some sort of a mental disability. Maybe that's the right place to put him.
Having a disability is not a defense in a criminal case. Another Joe.
Oh, so regarding the demonstrating of attacks on multiple vehicles, that wouldn't be it would not be a demonstration? It wouldn't be interpreted as a demonstration of communicating future violence with a machete?
Well, once again, I take you back to the statute that I just finished reading, terrorizing. A person is guilty of terrorizing if he communicates to any person a threat to commit or cause to be committed a crime of violence dangerous to life.
Yeah.
Communicates a threat. Now, in ordinary, everyday English, how would you communicate a threat? Let me count the ways. WhatsApp, email. If you're Elizabeth Warren, smoke signals.
Sign language?
Sign language, yeah.
A speech on January 6th.
A speech on January 6th, yeah. Ordinarily, when someone talks about communicating a threat, it's something that somebody says. And I would submit that the gravamen of this statute is to criminalize a situation where one person threatens another person, I'm going to take my machete and chop your head off, or I'm going to take my machete and really bang up your car. Well, wait a minute, would that work? Dangerous to life? It has to be dangerous to human life, not against the car. So you can't commit terrorism against a car. That's where the criminal mischief came in. Dangerous to human life against the person to whom the communication is made or another, and the natural and probable consequence of such threat is to place the person to whom the threat is communicated in reasonable fear that the crime will be committed. So if we're talking about intent here, it's Judy's intent that's at issue. Was she in reasonable fear if he communicated the threat? Now, I suspect there's an abundance of case law that would differentiate between speech and symbolic speech. I got a break for the seventh inning stretch. I'll come back for a moment on symbolic speech after that.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at GuamTraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts, brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
Half a day. This is Alicia Bloss from Security Title, reminding you that your 2020 property taxes are now due and payable. You may not know that you can pay your taxes online at pay.guam.gov. All you have to do is follow these simple steps. Register, log in, get a PIN, and pay. If you purchased a property after March 2nd, 2020, you will likely not receive a tax bill in your name, but you will still owe the tax. Call the professionals at Security Title. We are here to help.
right, so here we go. Seventh inning stretch, Wrigley Field, Chicago. That means only 2 more innings of Tall Tales today, and I left off with symbolic speech. So 9GCA 19.60 talks in terms of communicating a threat to commit or cause to be committed a crime of violence dangerous to human life. And my gloss is that ordinarily when we're talking about communicating a threat, it's saying something, threatening a person, saying something to that person. But there would be ways that you could communicate a threat without opening your mouth by perhaps displaying a certain kind of weapon or a particular form of conduct or something like that. And I suspect that there's an abundance of case law that would tell you what kind of symbolic speech would be sufficient to get it to support a conviction under 19.60. But the word intent, notwithstanding Judy's letter, does not appear in the statute. It's not what he intended. The only state of mind that's relevant is the state of mind of the victim, because the statute says the natural and probable cause of such threat is to place the person to whom the threat is communicated or the person threatened in reasonable fear, or the person, as you were threatened, in reasonable fear that the crime will be committed. Reasonable fear that the crime would be committed. For instance, if I happen to walk out of here and run into Pee Wee Herman in the parking lot, let's say Pee Wee finally got sprung, right? And he said to me, Bob, you know, I really don't like the way you handled your show. I'm going to beat the heck out of you. And he waves his fist in my face. I don't think a jury anywhere in the world would convict Pee Wee Herman of terrorizing if he said that to me, because the statute says it has to place the person in reasonable fear. The crime was
no fear there.
No fear of Pee Wee Herman. Yeah. Okay, so I wish that, or if I could have my way, we'd spend a little bit more time in what used to be called civics. 9th grade, we always had a civics class. And in 12th grade, we had something called American Problems. When we got into things like, you know, how courts work and how juries work, et cetera, the possibility here is that somebody's going to read this and say, yeah, you know, how do they, those lawyers, they weren't there. How do they know? And they should let Judy Guthertz go and tell the Supreme Court how she felt about it. That would be justice. All right, moving on to the next item on the card. It's the Post versus John Kinata. And you'll remember, was it yesterday that the news broke that that there had been some gambling at the airport, and no, I guess it was 2 days. Monday, yeah. There had been some gambling at the airport, and when the Post asked, how about this gambling at the airport, the knee-jerk reaction was a personnel matter. We can't talk about it. And the Post came out with a scathing editorial quoting a noted Freedom of Information Act advocate in the editorial. You remember that, right, Jose?
Refresh my memory of this noted person.
It wasn't Alan Dershowitz or Jonathan Turley or.
He's up there, though.
Yeah, same quality of representation. Yeah, and the Post nailed John Kinata's hide to the wall by saying, you know, you got to stop doing this. There's a lot you could say, like the police department did when they had that shooting. You could at least tell us that. So then the Post cheated. You know, they did a little investigative reporting, and this is what they came up with. A former police officer with the Guam International Airport Authority took full responsibility for his actions and apologized for embarrassing the agency after being caught promoting a gambling app while on the job. GIAA management served a final notice of adverse action to Jericho Santos, and the walls came tumbling down. On December 31, 2020, Executive Manager John Kanata stated that his final decision was to terminate the officer that same day. Now, that's the way the adverse action system works. If an employee commits misconduct, management has to serve him a notice of proposed adverse action that lays out what he did wrong, what laws and rules he broke, he violated, and the proposed punishment. What's going to happen to you here? The employee then has a 10-day period to have a face-to-face with the director and say, this is a mistake. That was my identical twin that did that stuff. It wasn't me. Or, with all due respect, Director Kanata, I did those things, but my fingers were crossed during the entire time that I did it, so my bad. The employee can have the face-to-face with the director. He can submit his defense in writing. He can have counsel come with him. He can bring witnesses before the director. The director then takes all of that into consideration and makes his decision. His decision is called a final notice of adverse action. And it can say, you know, it could start out like this. The notice of proposed says, I'm going to terminate you. But then the final notice might say something like, having considered the information that you brought before me and the documents represented, I conclude that termination would be too harsh for your offense. I will therefore suspend you for 10 days or something like that. But that's the way the system works. So what it amounts to is that on the 31st of December, they gave him a notice of final adverse action. You're fired, with a picture of Donald Trump on the top of the notice. Okay.
He has a little bit of free time.
Yeah. GIA management served a final, as you were. Details of the adverse action were provided by the Civil Service Commission to the Daily Post through a Freedom of Information Act request. Now, the way the Freedom of Information Act request works, a reporter from the Daily News could have gone to the Civil Service Commission and said, I want to see your papers on every one of your papers on appeals from the airport authority. And they would have had to trot them out for him right there. But it's a little bit more efficient to do the written demand and the 4-day turnaround. Details of the adverse action were provided by the Civil Service Commission to the Post through a Freedom of Information Act request. Santos is fighting the termination as he had submitted his resignation on December 30. Now, this is another one of those, like impeaching the president after he's left office. I don't remember who it was. I ought to look it up. But some genius in the Guam legislature amended our personnel law to say that if a person resigns from an agency, it does not distinguish his right to appeal from his voluntary termination. Isn't that crazy? Yeah. So he resigned on the 30th. He was fired on the 31st, and now he's appealing.
Wait, what?
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe that's where the Democrats got their idea about impeaching Trump. But it makes absolutely no sense.
So he's playing both sides?
Hard to say what he's doing. I suspect that when people do that, they're trying to game the system so that they could fill out an application form. Have you ever been fired?
Aha.
No, I've never been fired.
So there's a difference between being fired and being quitting and being terminated.
Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe that's it. Santos is fighting the termination. And then a quote, "I appreciate your support during my tenure here, and I take with me the valuable experiences I have gained over the 3 years. It has been a pleasure working with you and the team," Santos said in his resignation letter. Now, maybe he thought that since he resigned, they wouldn't serve him with a final notice. Maybe. According to the termination letter, Santos met with management to respond to the notice of proposed adverse action on December 15, and he verbally apologized. You admitted, now, I got to quibble again here. He verbally apologized. Verbal means words. Maybe he orally apologized. Otherwise, maybe both John Kanata and Jericho can sign, you know. So Jericho went in there and, you know, went through the sign language thing verbally, yeah. All right. And here's a quote from Kanata. "You admitted to being a gambler and that you have been a gambler since you were in school. You admitted that the poker game app was supposed to be a small group and that it was your fault for letting it get out of hand, suggesting that if it had only been a small group, it would have been okay. It just got too big. You stated the game was not meant to hurt anyone. You informed management that the names mentioned on the notice of proposed action did not play any other role and that they were just players and that you take full responsibility for your actions." So they were gamblers, but they were just players. "You do not deny gambling on duty, as you admitted that by doing so, it did not affect your work as you alleged. The relevant shift journal would show that you were working when it came time to performing your duties." Kanata added that GIAA personnel rules and regs prohibit gambling on duty and promoting gambling on government premises, adding that gambling is a criminal offense. Santos was accused of violating the rules through his conduct as a player for the Jack 10 poker group. I wonder if Drive-Thru Jack knows anything about this app. No other names of airport employees were listed in the final notice. Well, what you got to do, Guam Post, is go up there and say, "I want to see the notice of proposed adverse action." Then you can get the other names. Okay, going on. Another quote, "You do not deny promoting or soliciting other airport employees, including airport police officers and other individuals, to participate on the gambling act while both you and they were on or off duty. As a member of the Airport Police Division, you are expected to uphold and comply with the laws of Guam. The airport cannot tolerate nor condone these types of actions, and this type of conduct as an airport police officer on duty. You were the administrator, an agent, and a player of the Poker Brothers Gambling Act." I guess he didn't cut Kanata in for a share, right?
He's not a bro.
A status call for Santos' appeal before the Civil Service Commission is scheduled for February 26. GIAA management declined to comment, citing that it is a personnel matter. At least 2 senators were loaded to the allegations of gambling, etc. Now, going back here, GIA management declined to comment, citing that it is a personnel matter. They must take a lot of comfort from that, to be able to say that without knowing what they're saying, what it means, what it's about, and how the public reacts to it. Because all they had to do, they have the same papers as the Civil Service Commission has. All they had to do was say, "Here, take a look at this notice of final adverse action. It's now a public record. You can have it." But no. We don't want to do. It's a personnel matter. We're prohibited. It's a personnel matter. I can't give it to you. Yeah, and this is our government. You know, we wonder why sometimes things get so far out of socket when we have this kind of leadership in our government that thinks that it's okay to proceed forward and not know what you're doing and keeping the public in the dark. It kind of takes me back to the CCU again, you know, this bureaucratic pandemic, so to speak. Okay, let's head for Louisville, Kentucky.
Half a day, this is Honey. Here at APL, our expertise and extensive network can help you grow your business and reach out to more global markets. As a responsible carrier, APL is also committed to a sustainable future, whether it's protecting the environment or investing our efforts in giving back to the community. Our dedicated teams in Guam, Saipan, and on U.S. mainland are here to support you. Call 588-4651 or visit apl.com.
Okay, Google. Hey, Siri. Hi, Bixby.
Go ahead. I'm listening.
Open the Point app. Opening.
Live stream, on demand, swap stations. Check out the visual radio. Get the free app available on the App Store and Google Play, or go to thepoint.gu.
Okay, so here we go. Churchill Downs, Louisville, Kentucky, the home stretch. So we go from baseball at Wrigley Field for 2 more innings. And at the end, at the bottom of the 9th, we wind up in Churchill Downs horse racing. But that's the miracle of tall tales. All right, Nelson versus Rory, next item on the card. And this is a story from the Post. Commissioners at the Civil Service Commission have authorized staff to proceed with a post-audit investigation into hiring practices at the Port Authority and confirm whether such practices are in accordance with Guam laws and regulations, a matter requested by Talina Nelson. The CSC will focus on port employees who have indicated they have a criminal conviction in their applications under the suitability determination form, Board Chairman Juan Calvo indicated during a post-audit staff assessment hearing Tuesday. But before the CSC reached a decision, there was some discussion about what exactly the commission would be doing. Nelson specifically requested the CSC look into PAG, Port Authority employees, with any criminal history hired by the port in fiscal years 2017 through 2020 and documented justifications for hiring employees with any criminal history, according to Cynthia Camacho, a personnel management analyst at CSC. Guam laws and regulations prevent employment in government given a criminal history and certain conditions, and there is potential that personnel actions at the port may be held null and void if the CSC finds wrongdoing, said Roland Feheran, the CSC Personnel Management Administrator. Now, you remember the last time we went through this was Kevin Suswiko, and the Civil Service Commission found that he should not have been hired because he was not qualified for the job for which he was hired. He should not have been hired. But instead of sending a note, to Kevin Suswiko and to the Port Authority saying, you're fired, pack your stuff and get out of here, they gave the Port Authority 90 days to decide what to do with this guy. So it was one mishap after another. The Port Authority finally decided that they'd have to fire him, which seems, again, it's like impeaching the president after he's left office, right? When you determine that he shouldn't have had the job, that should have been the end of it. And because the port knew about Susuiko's problem when the Civil Service Commission made that announcement, the time had run. The 60 days had run, and Susuiko couldn't be fired. Well, this is what the Supreme Court finally decided. So I said, you got to reinstate this guy and give him back pay. Talk about a crazy decision. That's why whenever I hear the word Civil Service Commission, I'm not enthused. Sometimes they get it right, but not very often. And in this, of course, in this case of Kevin Susuiko, it wasn't them. It was them, because they should have just terminated Susuiko on the spot instead of saying to the port, well, we'll give you 90 days to see what kind of a solution you can come up with. Okay, so back to this news story. Nelson defined criminal history as an individual's criminal record. The situation here is that on January 14, 2021, there were some concerns within the community about the hiring practices at the port for a specific individual, Nelson said, without naming the individual. Why do people do that? Why don't they just come out and say Frankie Rosalind? Because everybody, you're not being cute when you do that. And you're not complying with it's a personnel matter, so I didn't want to say his name. The whole premise behind this is because we want to ensure that these practices remain in accordance with the law. There has been some other political statements made that we are going after those with criminal records and they cannot rebuild their lives. And that is false. We have very soft hearts. The issue is that the port is the main port of entry into Guam, and the concern relates to individuals with criminal records involving, quote, certain situations probably related to drug abuse or drug smuggling being in place in an agency in charge of the island's borders, Nelson said. When you cast a wide net hoping to catch something, you hurt people in the process. This was fisherman Rory Respicio, who doubles as the general manager of the port. That's what he said regarding Nelson's port's concern with Nelson's request. There are only 3 areas where an applicant won't be able to work at the port, according to Respicio: a felony conviction which bars employment in law enforcement, a criminal sexual conduct conviction which bars employment in contracting with GovGuam, and a family violence case which prevents an employee from becoming a supervisor up to an agency head. All port employees go through rigorous screening with the Department of Transportation to obtain their Transportation Worker Identification Credential, what they refer to as a TWIC. Failure to do so would mean termination, Respicio said. Yeah, well, termination, but maybe they'd be reinstated. Of course, whenever I start talking about the port and Respicio, the first thing that pops into my head is the Port 7. Let's just give these people some money and let it go. There's no sense horsing around with the Civil Service Commission and the courts anymore. So Respicio then says, in this case, the employees are left to wonder, is the senator talking about me? I have a conviction that's not related to those 3 categories. Am I not suitable to work with the Port Authority of Guam? Respicio said. He requested that Nelson name individuals he wanted the CSC to investigate. Otherwise, the CSC should hold the investigation in abeyance until she does. Juan Calvo said the case will move forward, but asked port management to identify employees based on their suitability determination forms. So, as I recall, suitability, if an employee if it's determined that an employee is qualified for the job, there's another criteria: suitability. Who is most suitable for the job? And although there wouldn't be a bar for certain kinds of criminal conviction, it might weigh against the employee in the suitability department, like Frankie Rosalind, a guy that just got busted for official misconduct, hardly seems suitable for employment in any government agency. But then, of course, where's my soft heart? That's the main. It's feelings that really count here, right? Okay, so that's that item on the card. The next item I have is, where is it? Just bear with me here for a second. Okay, I found it. I may not have time to do this, to do justice to this item, but you recall this item relates to that new comedy team that has just surfaced on the island. Are we there already? I guess I fumbled my way through that one, didn't I, Jose?
Another Joe just called and said we need to take a break.
He's so helpful.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll see you all tomorrow.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Two-thirds vote of the 100-member Senate. I'm Mary Corsetti, Fox News. That's how much it would take to convict former President Trump on the charge of incitement of insurrection. The Senate impeachment trial of former President Trump continued Wednesday. Democratic House impeachment managers made their opening arguments. House impeachment manager Representative David Cicilline.
His supporters were attacking law enforcement. The mayor and the police chief were calling for help. Members of Congress and the vice president were inside